So let's talk through every single Warhammer 40k release in order, starting with each of the things that we know are coming, and then moving on to the things that Games Workshop has hinted us, or things that seem likely to manifest themselves later in the edition. Jumping straight in and starting with the extreme near future, we know that Kill Team Nightmare is coming this weekend. This is the box set that's fairly hotly anticipated for Drukhari Mandrakes versus Night Lords Legionaries, and it comes in the box set along with the Genitorum Hub terrain piece. Looks like it's a little bit more expensive than Kill Team Salvation, unfortunately. I suspect part of the inspiration for that might be that the Legionaries kit tends to sell for a bit more, plus that Genitorum piece is maybe a bit bigger terrain than was in the last set. In any case, looks to be $140 or £85. At that sort of price tag, it looks like it roughly equates to getting the both sets of kill teams for the money, and then you basically get the terrain piece and the paper bits included free. Pre-order date for this one is Saturday the 6th of April, so full launch on the 20th of April. The individual kit releases will likely follow 2 to 3 months later after the big box release. The Drukhari get their Mandrakes. Pretty cool new models here that they desperately needed in their lineup, given that they have had the resin kit for these discontinued for a while now, and they're really quite a useful unit to have on the board for infiltration and objectives. The Night Lords kill team I think is pretty hotly anticipated. This would be the standard Chaos Legionaries kit with a Night Lord upgrade sprue, but quite a fun one with a whole load of flayed flesh details, some unique weapons like lightning claws and things. It's really cool to see them get some proper attention in the 40k setting. As ever with these releases, bear in mind all the discount places that you can get your hands on them. I do have some channel affiliate links down in the video description, and these help support Auspex Tactics for any purchases as well as saving a bit of money. Supply for previous Kill Team box sets has been fairly poor, though it looks like this one initially might not be too bad. I've got 4 discount retailers linked down in the video description. They should be going on sale at midnight at Wargame Portal in the USA. That's midnight between the Friday to the Saturday this week, or 10 AM from Element Games in the UK. Both those likely at 15% off. Element can be a little bit variable depending on the offering. For the rest of spring though, we know that there's basically 4 more Codex releases to come. I'm a little unsure what the order is going to be of the Tau versus the Orks and Custodes. I feel like Games Workshop could realistically release them in either order if they wanted to. Starting with the Orks though, as mentioned, they were billed for spring. I'm guessing they're going to be launching at the same weekend as Adeptus Custodes as the Necrons and the Admech did. And they're not getting a massive release this time round. They're getting this new Big Mech model that you can see pictured here. Looks like Tank Busters will be waiting on the shelf for their update, unfortunately. They'll be coming out alongside the new Ork Codex. I really hope they manage to make the various greenskin ways of war viable. I feel like it's often something they've struggled with in the past. The biggest releases will be the Stomper Boys Battle Force box set and an updated Combat Patrol box set, the contents of which we don't know yet. The Big Mech is basically a big orc in a sort of sturdy exo-frame carrying some pretty massive weaponry. It gets a fun tractor blaster, which does look kind of hilariously dangerous against enemy fly vehicles but doesn't hit very accurately as you'd expect for orcs. You can swap that out for a custom Mega Blaster and has a melee weapon choice between a hydraulic claw or driller in the other arm. It's also got a shock booster type thing that allows him to teleport his squad up the board, warping through enemy models and terrain. I feel like his model was quite well received. I do think it's quite fun. The other big release for the Orks, and likely the first place you can get that mech, will be in the Stomper Boys box set. It's likely to come out here first and then get an individual character release down the line. And that Battle Force box set is packaged alongside is an unusual one, getting an entire huge Stomper in the box, plus 10 boys, 10 looters or burners, and a truck. I'd guess this is going to be priced somewhere in the region of the Christmas Battle Force sort of things, so around about £135, €175, or $220, could be a little bit more or a little bit less. If it does wind up at that sort of price tag, then it looks like it would be quite a good discount as far as Games Workshop goes, around about 40% off presuming you did actually want the models, and has over 1,000 points worth of orcs in the box, though that is hilariously massively carried by that Stomper. It is maybe a bit of a weird box in that you absolutely have to want the Stomper to want to pick it up. If you don't, it's really not going to be the one for you. Moving on to the Custodes, who as mentioned, I believe will probably be launching on the same weekend as the Orks. They seem to be releasing with a similar sort of design philosophy. They've got one new miniature in a new shield captain, and he's going to be coming in a Battle Force box of his own called the Auric Champions. There'll be Codex Adeptus Custodes, and then again likely an updated Combat Patrol box. Feels like the Custodes one is one that is almost certainly going to get worse. It would be a shame if so, as the current one is regarded as one of the better ones. The new shield captain is this guy, armed with the Melter Pyrothite Spear and a rather cool shield. The internet hasn't been particularly kind to this guy, basically saying that he's a bit too squat and feels like a Leagues of Votann guy. Maybe the overarching looping head crest doesn't go to help with that too much. I feel like the camera angle, the wide stance and the way that he's holding his weapons maybe don't help too much with that. From the previews it doesn't look like there's going to be any major change of war gear options for him, just that Melter Spear and shield. Looks like you do have a head swap option though for helmeted one versus non-helmeted. Maybe not the most super exciting release for the Custodes, given that they've already got shield captains that you can build out of their Wardens and Custodian Guard box sets. In theory though, rules wise he could be fairly interesting in game, both getting a Presidium shield and the Melter shot, and also a Guardian spear. In general, before you had to choose between the Sentinel blade and taking the shield, or taking the more powerful melee weapon in the Guardian spear, it now seems that you can have both. As with the Orks, he's first going to be cropping up in the Battle Force box set. This one is called the Auric Champions and seems to focus on the Custodes Elite. The new shield captain, 6 Alarus Custodian Terminators, 6 Virtus Praetor Bikers, and 5 Custodian Wardens. I think it's really quite cool to see both the Wardens and the Terminators discounted this way, given that they haven't been available in the Combat Patrol box set. The main talking point around this one has been whether you really want another 6 bikers, as people might already have a good amount in their collection, plus people are just generally underwhelmed by the 10th edition rules for them so far. That's nothing to say that they won't be strong in the future though, given Games Workshop's balance and points updates. The likely pricing of this is likely to be somewhere in the same sort of ballpark as the Orks one, somewhere around £100 to £140 or $210 to $230. It looks like it'll be around about a 35% discount or so, again fairly good by Games Workshop standards, and as it's Custodes you're pretty much guaranteed to get a whole load of points in the box. It's over 1200 points even if you don't assemble any other characters whatsoever. At 5.6 points per dollar, it's one of the easiest ways to get a 40k army on the table for cheap if going directly with Games Workshop's plastics. I feel like it's really quite a good set. I think I might have been tempted to swap out one of those biker units for standard Custodian Guard Squad though if you're really trying to design the ultimate Custodes battle force, but I don't think it's too far off. Also for spring we still have the proper release of Codex Tau Empire to come, the actual Codex being released individually plus the individual Kroot kits coming out. We've already had the Kroot Hunting Packs box set, which still seems to be in at least fairly good supply. Not sure if Games Workshop just made way more of it, or if it wasn't quite as popular as they thought. From sales data I've seen though, it still seems to have sold in some pretty massive numbers. Though it still seems to be available in plenty of places around the world. For my discount retailers, I believe that Element Games in the UK and Fenris Workshop in Canada have some available, and they're linked down the video description, and they're both selling them at a discount still. Other places are out of them, though you might be able to find some in various discount retailers in your own parts of the world. Otherwise though, for the Tau Codex we'll have the full Codex release. We know all the rules for it, given that that gets leaked as soon as the box set goes out, but what we are waiting for the Tau are the official points changes that will allow the book to be used in tournaments and things. At the moment we've only got the printed Codex ones, which are kind of obviously wrong. They're the ones right from the start of 10th edition when a whole load of Tau units were kind of stupidly overcosted. Things like Riptide's up at 245 when they've now dropped down to 165. Alongside that book will be a whole load of Kroot kits, 4 characters in the Flesh Shaper, War Shaper, Trail Shaper and Lone Spear, the Kroot Rider and the Kroot Rampagers, and the Kroot Carnivores and Hounds. Pretty crazy that the Kroot have got similar numbers of kits to some full-fledged factions out there like the Leagues of Votann. We'll also be getting a new Tau Combat Patrol box set. We do know the contents of this one. It's going to be one with a Tau Commander, Devilfish and Infantry. Looking through the Kroot miniatures so far, there's the 3 Shapers. 2 of them came in the Hunting Pack box set. We're still waiting on the release of the Trail Shaper on the left. They're quite fun models. I do think that they seem a lot stronger in the Kroot Hunting Pack versus more general Tau lists though. We've then got the Kroot Rider, a big chunky one with a gun. Could be a cheap model for screening and bully some Space Marines or light infantry. The interesting Lone Spear with the Lone Operative type rules, who can act as a focal buffing unit for other Kroot attacks if you want him to. A set of 3 Kroot Rampagers, who are basically a Tau close combat melee unit, which is definitely interesting. They look like they do enough damage on the charge to be really quite intimidating and put lots of wounds on the table, though being mounted and having fairly slow movement at 7 inches maybe isn't the best news for them, even if they can scout forward a touch. Kroot Hounds have their own box sets in plastic now, rather than it being either from the Fast Orca box or that resin set. They can scout forward and make some very, very long charges, particularly if they start near some infantry. Could be annoying as screening units, though they do seem to cost a little bit more per squad than they did before. Finally for the Kroot, we've got the standard Kroot carnivores reimagined. Pretty nice to see the standard Kroot birdmen get a bit more of a detailed plastic kit. Their old one really was quite dated at this point, though you do get far less models in the box for the money though. Lastly for the Tau, we do have their Combat Patrol box set. This will replace the one with the Ghost Keel, Stealth Suit and Ethereal in it, and this one contains a Tau Crisis Battlesuit Commander, the one that you can build as either an Enforcer or a Cold Star. One unit of Fire Warriors that you can build as Strikes or Breachers, a Devilfish and some Pathfinders. As Combat Patrols for 10th edition goes, it does look like it's one of the better ones, even if it doesn't offer quite as much of a discount compared with the previous Tau Empire Combat Patrol. All the units really do seem pretty usable in-game and fairly interesting and exciting. You might want to pick up some Crisis suits to go with that commander though. Then lastly for the Spring Codex releases, we have Codex Chaos Space Marines. Given that these guys had their Codex Focus and miniature reveals last, it does seem they'll probably be the last ones to release. If we're going by technical definitions of spring as Games Workshop appear to with their previous releases, this book and army could be releasing any time up to June the 20th, so really quite a long way away at this point. Hopefully it's a little bit earlier than that. Games Workshop do tend to be a little bit nebulous with their Codex roadmaps. Codex Chaos Space Marines had a whole bunch of hints as to what sort of things would get inside it. There's going to be a glorious 8 detachments for the 8-pointed star. 7 new ones, including ones that are Cultist Horde themed, Demon Engines plus tanks, Sneaky Alpha Legion type themes, one for the Twisted Demon Engines and followers of Vashtor, and a Renegades and Pirates themed one that sounds like it could be quite good for the Red Corsairs. I feel like the detachments for this one are really quite hotly anticipated, as this would be the way to give you a bit more different Chaos Legion themed, compared with everyone using the same detachment that you have now. Otherwise, alongside that, it looks like almost a bigger version of the Custodes and Ork release. Unfortunately, not many new miniatures. It seems like Chaos Bikers and things are going to be waiting till next time. Again, they've got 2 character releases, 2 new Chaos Lord ones, and each of those is going to be coming in its own new Battle Force box set. And I feel like the Battle Force box sets have gone down really quite well with Chaos Collectors comparatively. They're generally fairly newish models, and Games Workshop seems to have built them as a sort of core box set for the heart of the army, and an expansion type one maybe more aimed at existing Chaos Collectors. We also have Combat Patrol Chaos Space Marines coming out as well, and we do know the contents of that one as they showed us a picture of it. Starting out with the character releases, we've got the Chaos Lord on foot. This one looks like he might be to update and replace the one from the Blackstone Fortress game with the Demon Hammer, maybe giving you a bit more of a standard multi-part model to lead the Chaos forces. Hopefully they'll still keep the Demon Hammer one on sale though. This one has a fair few different weapon options. You've got the choice of a Chain Axe, Thunder Hammer or Spite Power Maul called an Accursed Maul in his right hand, and then backed up by a Power Fist or a Plasma Pistol in his left. I guess if you've got the option for a Power Fist plus also say a Maul as well, you might have some sort of system of extra attacks or be able to choose between multiple different profiles depending on what sort of foe he's fighting. You've also got a Horned Helmet option versus a bare head. The other Chaos Lord is the one with the jump pack. This one I think is quite a welcome release to be honest, given that Games Workshop got rid of the jump pack Lord in the last Chaos update. Will be nice for Night Lord players to be able to have something with the brutal lightning claws leading their force of raptors. This guy seems to be billowed upwards, wafted on a stream of smoke issuing from a slain Primaris helmet, and again he's not doing too badly for choice of war gear, a Power Fist, Power Axe or Lightning Claws for his close combat weapons, or Plasma or Bolt Pistol if he doesn't take the Lightning Claws. Could be an interesting thing to add back into the Chaos Space Marines, a lord that can actually get to combat really quite quickly. Free stratagems and boosted melee could be nice for Raptors. I'm not sure whether he'll be able to lead Warp Talons or not though. For the battle forces, the first one is the Dread Talons. In this one you get a Jump Pack Lord, 10 Raptors that you can build as Warp Talons, the big multi-part and fairly flexible Chaos Demon Prince, and a set of Accursed Cultists, a Dark Commune and Chaos Cultists, so overall it feels like a bit of a Jump Packs plus Cultist Horde sort of army. Maybe not the first things you'd usually want to pick up when you're starting a Chaos Space Marine army, but it does feel like it's almost tailor-made to be an expansion to certain existing players' collections. Estimating at the same price as the Christmas Battle Force box set, it'll give you a discount of around about 38%, which seems to be fairly good by Games Workshop standards. Though it maybe doesn't give you a huge amount of points in the box, largely due to the Cultist Horde type element. The Cannon Fodder just generally doesn't cost quite as many points in-game. Otherwise, the more core box set is the Veterans of the Long War box. This one gets you the Chaos Lord on foot, 10 Legionaries and 10 Terminators, 5 Chosen and 5 Possessed, so really quite an elite force of Chaos Space Marine veterans here. I feel like Games Workshop have done a pretty good job of targeting the kits that are maybe most in demand for new players starting a Chaos Space Marine army. The discount on the kits is maybe a tiny bit less than the Dread Talons one at 34% versus 38%, though I think that's not the amount of difference that you're really going to care about. And you do get quite a lot more points in the box for this one at 935. This one feels like the first one that you'd pick up if you were getting into Chaos Space Marines for the first time. Though Games Workshop did say as such that they have tried to structure the box sets in a way that if people really did want to, they could go for both of them and have the vast majority of a 2000 point Chaos Space Marine army right then and there. I'll just quickly touch on the channel news around those, in that I'm going to be doing those for the Allspecs Tactics channel giveaway in May. Seemed kind of appropriate with cool new Chaos box sets. The rules for this one are there'll be 3 winners that get posted both those sets of box sets, so the Dread Talons and the Veterans of the Long War. As per normal, there's 2 equal ways to enter, either supporting on Patreon or via social media, both of those links down in the video description. I'll loop back to this at the end of the video to talk through it a little bit more if you're interested in entering for this. Finally, for the Forces of Chaos, we have the Chaos Space Marine Combat Patrol box set. This one I'm kind of uncertain whether or not Games Workshop meant to reveal it. They had it in a still image but didn't actually talk about it in their reveal show whatsoever. This will replace the one with the Dark Apostle, Hellbrute and Havocs, and it gives you a Master of Possession, 5 Possessed, 10 Legionaries and 10 Chaos Cultists. As per standard with Games Workshop's updated combat patrols for 10th edition, the discount isn't quite as good as the 9th edition one, and you don't get quite as many points in the box, but I'd still say it's not really the worst entry point to Chaos Space Marines. 450 points in a combat patrol really isn't the worst. The discount amounts to around about 27% compared with buying the kit separately. And in general, I'd say that most of the miniatures are recent and interesting enough that most people would want them, most of them hailing from 8th edition. Nice to have the 2 core faction sort of troops choices, and then 1 squad of violent and dangerous elites with their appropriate leader. As per the rest of the Battle Force offerings, there'll be only temporary offerings, where this will stick around for longer for the rest of 10th edition and likely beyond. Doing a small sidestep into Horus Heresy releases, I feel like one of the things that's more relevant for 40k collectors is the Legion Command box set. The release of this one was also billed for spring by Games Workshop's Horus Heresy timetable. It gets you a plastic kit of veteran Space Marines with power swords and storm shields, plus a great big cool banner. And it sounds like there's going to be multiple ways to pick this up, either the individual sprue separately, or getting it alongside either a set of Mark 6 or Mark 3 armour, so 3 different ways to buy. In general, this one's been really quite well received. They've got cool crested heads, and I feel like the shields and swords look pretty awesome. For 40k collectors, I've seen people speculating about making all sorts of Space Marine veterans out of it, and particularly I thought it would be interesting to potentially combine with maybe some Assault Intercessors and get you multiple squads of Blade Guard if you wanted. In theory, 1 box of Assault Intercessors, Ottoman Furnace Marines with a bit of cutting and sticking, and you could have 9 Blade Guard and 1 Ancient if you bought 2 sets of this upgrade sprue. It does kind of remain to be seen how good a deal that will turn out to be though. We don't know the price of the sprue yet. I'd guess somewhere between £20 and £30 or $35 and $50 US. I feel like there's a good chance it winds up being interesting enough though to tempt at least some 40k collectors. Getting on to releases that could be kind of borderline spring or summer next, and next up we have Kill Team Termination. This one was kind of recently revealed at Adepticon, though I feel like there's at least a fairly good chance we're somewhere between 2 and 4 months away from the release of this one, given that Kill Team releases seem to be roughly quarterly, and we've only just had Kill Team Nightmare with the Mandrakes and the Night Lords going up for pre-order this week, so it could be a fair while yet before people are able to pick up their Hernkin Jaegers for the Leagues of Votann, or the new Brew Brothers kits for the Genestealer cults. I say their box set is unlikely to be any lesser priced compared with the recent release of Kill Team Nightmare, given that you get the Brood Coven set in there for the Genestealer cults, so you're sort of getting 3 plastic kits rather than the usual 2. I'd say it's at least going to be £85, €110 or $140, and there's a pretty reasonable chance that it could be more. As well as the plastic miniature kill teams, you also get a couple of terrain plasma generators as well. They are quite big hefty things that could block line of sight. For the actual new miniatures in the box, we have the Hernkin Jaegers. These appear to be the Leagues of Votann equivalent of things like, say, Space Marine Scouts or Ork Commandos. Interestingly enough, Votann void suits wearing some supposedly stealthy trench coats on top, maybe to hide the colours of that armour a little bit and maybe keep out the cold. They're supposedly a self-sufficient commando unit aimed to sabotage and undermine enemies even if they don't have any supplies themselves. And it seems that as well as their kill team rules, I'd be very surprised if they don't get the infiltrate keyword for Warhammer 40K deployment. Seems like that's just a role that the Leaguers of Votann are missing right now, and could be pretty interesting to add to an army as a result. At first glance, it looks like their stock weapon might be a bolt shotgun. They've got plenty of options for pistols and plasma knives and things as well, and a few fancy things like a Magna Coil sniper rifle and an adaptive payload missile launcher. Here's the squadron full. It looks like you get 10 in a box set. I'd guess that you'll probably have to field them as an entire squad of 10 in Warhammer 40k. Perhaps similar to things like Orc Commandos, unless they get the option to be split in half with a Sagittor perhaps. There's a few other rather cool, interesting looking bits of war gear as well. Looks like one of them can have an interesting sort of crossbow pistol. One of them's got a rather enormous demo charge that I can't help but think is going to make a bang in 40k terms. And you can spot that sort of missile pistol at the front on the left as well. Their models do seem to have been pretty well received. I do think they look quite fun, even if I must admit the idea of trench coats over armour suits is kind of curious. For the Genestealer cult side of things, we've got their Brood Brothers kill team. They were a bit nebulous as to exactly how these are going to be delivered, though it looks like it's an upgrade sprue for the newer version of Cadian shock troops. I guess this one's to replace the old kit of that kind. For a few notable options, there's one guy with a clawed hand on the sergeant there, a medic with a sort of injector pistol, someone with a shock maw and a cult icon. It'll be interesting to see how these guys are realised in game for Warhammer 40k. I wouldn't be too surprised if they actually get a dedicated datasheet in Codex Genestealer Cults. And if you get the actual Termination box set, then you also get the Brood Coven kits with the Patriarch, Magus and Primus in there. Perhaps a surprising amount of cultist goodness there, though I feel like if you do collect Genestealer Cults, that's probably going to be something that you already have. Then moving on to the Codex's build for summer by Games Workshop's big release timetable, we've got Codex Genestealer Cults and Codex Adeptus Auroritus. Again, if we're going by technical definitions of summer, I guess that would be somewhere between 20th of June to 22nd of September. So in that period, we could expect to see these two codexes plus the super secret mystery codex. At this point, I'd expect them to get some sort of new models. It seems that Games Workshop's policy is to usually at least throw out an extra character model, even if they're not doing something major. I really wouldn't be too surprised if that's what both of these factions get, though I guess the Genestealers already get that Brood Brother upgrade sprue, which is something I suppose. There was a rather cool looking rumour engine that showed some flowing text and script. That looks like it could be very similar styling to some of the Sisters jump pack units like Celestine, though it is a bit non-specific. Could also be maybe a reimagined Sanguinor for the Blood Angels, or even something for Stormcast Eternals in Age of Sigmar. It's not impossible they might get major releases, though at minimum I guess we'll get a character and a read-on Combat Patrol box set. I feel like that's very bad news for the Genestealer cults, given that their current one is kind of standout amazing compared with the rest of them. I just feel like there's no way that Games Workshop are going to redo that and keep it as good. One of the most intriguing things on the horizon is the Redacted Codex that Games Workshop put on their roadmap a while back. This one was also built to release in summer. I feel like regardless of what it actually turns out to be, Games Workshop have done well with the marketing of this one, just by showing that something's coming but not telling us what just drives speculation, even if there's literally every chance it could just be one of the many other codexes that they still have to come. In general, the fact though that it wasn't revealed alongside Genestealer Cults and Sisters does make people think that it could well be something a bit more out of the ordinary. Speculation for maybe an Emperor's Children Codex release was fairly rife, though I feel like at this stage that would be almost a bit of a surprise. I can't help but think that we might have already seen previews or model reveals for it at some stage. Otherwise though, there were some printing factory leaks of what looks like an Agents of the Imperium Codex. That is something that I guess would come at some time during 10th edition, and I guess that might be interesting enough to have it as an out of the ordinary release for Games Workshop, so it certainly could be this. At the end of the Arcs of Omen sequence, which certainly did bring with it a whole load of cool new models for the central characters, there was a heavy teaser for Inquisitor Kotias, so my first guess for a model release for that would be him. Anything else Inquisitorial or Imperial agents would be kind of cool though. When we get into summer and this sort of time horizon, a new mission deck for Warhammer 40k seems like quite a strong possibility. In 8th and 9th edition, they often made some semi-major changes to the game on around about a yearly basis, perhaps redoing and rebalancing missions for the competitive sort of game. The mission deck that we got at the start of 10th edition was the Leviathan mission deck, that one kind of implying that later in the edition there will be new ones to come. I'd guess that at one of the more major balance passes in 10th edition we'll get an entirely new one, maybe with some tweaks and changes to the core gameplay of certain missions. That could come alongside some digital updates that make some sort of changes to the core way that you build armies, or some more major shake-ups to core rules for the game that might be more or less popular. That's all a bit speculative, but that is what they've done in the past. If we're going for around about a year since 10th edition came out, it seems possible that that could come out at the September balance update. Another thing that's probably on the time horizon for summer, at least in the UK, is the Combat Patrol magazine. This one is the one that we saw in January and had its trial run around then. The 10th edition version of the Warhammer Conquest and then the Warhammer Imperium magazines that came out with 8th and 9th, and they certainly got a massive amount of interest. This one's a bit more of a shake-up to the formula, given that you don't really get two main broad opposing factions in this one. You're more sort of getting multiple smaller broken down armies based around the 9th edition combat patrols, plus the 10th edition ones for Tyranids and Space Marines. If it comes out in a similar sort of style to Conquest and Imperium, this would likely launch sometime maybe around August perhaps. That'd be the UK release date, and then releases in the USA and various European countries and everywhere else that Conquest and Imperium came to around the world would likely follow sometime after that. It can be very variable though. In the UK, the cost of the issues are £10 each. This one looks like it will eventually build 9 different combat patrols over the course of 80 issues, each of them with a random bonus unit thrown in, whether it's a character or a different squad. And there's the option for a £2 premium sub that over the course of the whole collection will get you 8 other units that are genuinely quite big and imposing. There's things like a Brutalis Dreadnought and a Rogel Dawn battle tank in there. Overall, for a standard sub, it looks like over the whole course of the collection, between the models and the paints, it looks like you get those things for around about 20% less than the same at discount retailers. It's not an enormous saving and presumes you want exactly those miniatures, so I feel like it's maybe a bit more of an entertainment type purchase than a true value saving type thing from my point of view, though it certainly could be interesting to look out for certain issues that might well have things at way cheaper than you might get elsewhere. There's also a few more random freebies thrown in for people signing up to it, including paintbrushes and what looks like a brand new Infernus Space Marine Sergeant. They often have a unique sculpted miniature just to sort of promote the entire thing and generate a bit more excitement. Looking further afield, things get a bit more speculative, though I feel like Games Workshop have given away enough stuff that we can reliably say that at least a few things are pretty much definitely coming. Starting with the very obvious, it looks like every single 40k faction will get a Codex in 10th edition, and the default pattern for that is getting at least one new model, even if it is just a character miniature for some of them. It looks like the Combat Patrol boxes have all got redone in some way so far. I'm not sure if that will be absolutely universal for everyone, but it does seem to be the general theme, and perhaps more so than in previous times, a lot of these seem to be coming out alongside launch battle forces. Things like the Custodes, Orks and Chaos Space Marine ones aren't really the normal pattern for Games Workshop in ages past. Seems like if they've got an excuse to do a big Battle Force launch, then they will. Seems that barring any surprises, that looks like the way they're going to roll things out, unless they pull any weird or surprise moves like say having the Knight Codexes both share the same book, or Deathwatch get combined with the Agent of the Imperium in some way. I still say that's more unlikely than it is likely though. Talking through a couple of the other codexes that we know are coming but haven't had them officially announced yet, as I mentioned in a previous video for the Aeldari, I have personally seen what appears to be a new Asurmen miniature, be done in a very similar style to some of the other Phoenix lords like Jane Zar and Morgan Ra. I'd guess as a result he's probably going to be coming alongside the Codex, and hopefully it's not just an individual character release. There's plenty more aspect warriors that need updating for the Space Elves. The Warp Spiders in particular are maybe one bit that Games Workshop needs to get round to eventually. Those models I believe turned 30 not so very long ago. The Astra Militarum also seem to be an army that's built for something at least fairly major in 10th edition. We got a whole bunch of rumour engines that seem to be very specific to the Guard. The sandbag and fortification and minefield bits really seem like they'd struggle to be anything else. The banner also looks like it's almost certainly Guard. Maybe the parchment or bandage sort of servo skull is a bit less obvious, and that could be other things Imperium, so it feels like it's a reasonable chance it's for them as well. Putting those together, and it looks like there's at least one big model with a scenic base with some sandbags and fortifications on there. Not really too sure what that might be. Maybe a big gun emplacement or command bunker or something like that could be kind of fun, or it could be a character miniature with a really cool big base. There have been a few rumours out there for more updated Death Corps of Krieg. I think a lot of people will be very happy if they updated their Death Riders, which are one of Forge World's more popular kits despite being astronomically priced. Two of the other armies that seem almost certain to be getting major releases in 10th edition are the Leagues of Votann and World Eaters. They're both new factions that came out towards the end of 9th edition, and for both of them it felt like they got some okay model releases, but it did feel like it wasn't their full range. And as they've done with several other new factions in the game, I feel like we've seen a good chunk of their kits, but we're going to get more down the line. For the Leagues of Votann, I guess we're getting the scouts to fill the infiltrator sort of role for the army. The other kits that I'd be pretty sure that they're going to get at some stage will be a jump pack unit, given we saw the prototype for their jump pack squad in their kill team for the Hearthkin Warriors the other year. Maybe for other 40k obvious tropes they could go down, something like a big walker or big robot automaton could be kind of fun for the Votann. They really do feel like one of the armies where a sort of combat walker would feel very appropriate for them. And we'll have to see what other fun stuff Games Workshop comes out with. I feel like their release for 10th won't be a small character one though. Similarly for the World Eaters, it did feel even more obvious that their release was literally only half their range. I did see some speculation at the time that the World Eaters release for 9th edition wasn't maybe a particularly planned one and things got moved around. Perhaps one of the more anticipated units that World Eaters were rumoured to get would be some Red Butchers Terminators or other World Eaters Terminator Elites. The Thousand Sons and the Death Guard both have those of course, but I feel like perhaps even more so than them, there seems like there's some Berserker units that seem near guarantees to happen when the Codex comes out, heavily teased by Games Workshop already. First up, seeing as we've got Juggernaut mounted characters, it did seem very odd that we didn't really get anything for them to lead that seemed particularly obvious. They could join 8-bound and things, I guess, but it even looked like in certain bits of artwork they looked like they were leading Khorne Berserkers mounted on Juggernauts into battle, so I feel like there's a pretty strong chance of that happening when the Codex comes out. It's just maybe not all that common for mounted units to be able to lead infantry variants. And another thing that's clearly missing from the range would be a more standard World Eaters Lord on foot. Can't help but think that that's probably also going to be coming out alongside as well. For a character that does seem to be pretty much guaranteed to happen though, is the World Eaters Berserker Surgeon. This would be their equivalent of sort of like a depraved apothecary for the Legion. Basically the guys that keep the warbands at least somewhat functional, responsible for maintaining the Butcher's Nails that gives them their prestigious size, strength and rage, recruit new World Eaters with stolen gene seed, and also creates the monstrous 8-bound by locking them in their 8 cages with all the blood letters. There were just really quite a lot of references to them in the lore in and around the last World Eaters Codex release. It did feel like they were going to be a unit that released alongside, but then nothing happened since. As such, my first two guesses for a World Eaters release will be a Berserker Surgeon plus Khornate Juggernaut Cavalry. Maybe Terminators and a Lord on foot being two of the other things that I'd really quite like to see. Then getting perhaps more speculative, Games Workshop does seem to like keeping the new factions for Warhammer 40k coming over the years. We had things like Genestealer Cult get a release in 7th, Death Guard Custodians and Chaos Knights all get more fleshed out codexes in 8th, and then Leagues of Votann and World Eaters turn up in 9th. With that sort of history, I feel like it would be more surprising if Games Workshop didn't have any sort of new faction for us in 10th edition, perhaps more so than if they did. At the top of people's expectations list are probably a couple of Chaos armies. The Emperor's Children in particular seem basically a given at some point. They have now done actual plastic releases for all the major deity-specific legions in Thousand Sons, Death Guard and World Eaters. Emperor's Children are basically only a matter of time, and they'll certainly come alongside new Noise Marines and Fulgrim. I'd say if anything they're probably odds on to happen within 10th edition. I guess could be a launch faction towards the start of 11th as an alternative. Maybe the other big one that seems kind of likely are the Dark Mechanicum. Vastor is currently hanging around with the Chaos Space Marines right now, and it looks like he will get a detachment to represent him in Codex Chaos Space Marines. Maybe that makes them a little bit less likely to have a proper Dark Mechanicum style release sometime in 10th, though I'd say it doesn't entirely rule it out. They're another one of the more popular factions that people might like to see Games Workshop realise at some point. We have seen some hints of them with things like Negavolt cultists from Blackstone Fortress in the past. It will be interesting to see what sort of weird tech heresy Games Workshop could scrape together for them. Maybe some sort of combination of Chaos Androids, various demon engines, maybe some obliterators, or whatever else Vashtor can cook up. I still think this would be a pretty awesome narrative event if Vashtor does unlock his big vault of weapons and it turns out to be some sort of new Dark Mechanicum force, maybe renascent Men of Iron, or something of similar magnitude. In any case, rampant speculation aside, my guess is that we'd get at least one of these during 10th edition, if not something different. Probably more likely towards the end of 10th rather than the start. If 9th edition is anything to go by, Emperor's Children I think are the more likely of the two, though there's plenty of other options out there. Finally, for an artwork teaser that we've had floating around for a while is the potential for Primaris Cato Sicarius at some point. He's now the last remaining Ultramarine model that's still a firstborn miniature, and we have seen new artwork of him in updated Primaris form. Feels like the most self-aggrandizing son of Ultramar is probably due for an update at some stage. He has been active in the lore alongside Rabute Gilliman in the Indomitus Crusade as well. I feel like the way that Games Workshop are doing the 10th edition codexes might be kind of telling. Lots of other firstborn models and fine cast resin miniatures have been retired, but notably him and a few other particularly beloved Space Marine characters did not get that. My guess is that each of these will be eventually updated to plastic in one form or another when Games Workshop gets round to them and feels like feeding us some more Space Marines. I think they could basically release at any sort of time as a result, might be alongside some more chapter-specific battle forces at some point if Games Workshop want to. Again, could be one for maybe like the tail end of 10th edition when people feel like they haven't had enough Space Marines for a while. In any case, looks like there's plenty of Warhammer releases scheduled for the next few months and the rest of 10th edition in general. Here's just a rough summary of things that I've mentioned with some very rough time horizons. Over the next 3 months, Kill Team Nightmare this week, Orks and Custodes with their releases, Tau and Kroot with their full release, Chaos Space Marines with their battle forces, and like that Legion Command Squad for Heresy. I guess for summer, if that's July onwards, that'll be Genestealer Cults and Sisters of Battle, alongside characters and combat patrols and things, the Mystery Codex, maybe Agents of the Imperium, maybe something completely different. There's the Combat Patrol magazine, which I'd guess would be sometime around this sort of time frame, Kill Team Termination for the Genestealers and the Leagues of Votann, and maybe a new mission deck for Warhammer 40K to update the Leviathan one at some point. For things further afield, as mentioned, I feel like particularly large releases seem most likely for the Leagues of Votann and the World Eaters, maybe the Astra Militarum too. There's a pretty good chance that at least one new faction is out there, maybe Emperor's Children most likely. And for other random teasers, Asurmen looks like they're coming at some stage, and Primaris Cato Sicarius has been teased. Again, feels like one that's going to be sooner or later, though it could be much later for all we know. In any case, let me know all your thoughts on that down in the comments below. What are you most looking forward to, and what do you most hope or fear for Games Workshop releasing later in the edition? As mentioned, I said I'd cycle back to that Chaos Space Marine Battle Force giveaway, which will be the channel one for May, so here's the full details for entering for that one. As mentioned, this one will be for both of the new Chaos Battle Force box sets, so some pretty big forces of Chaos out there, and 3 channel viewers will get the chance to win those, getting both the Dread Talons and the Veterans of the Long War box sets. As per always with the Auspex Tactics channel giveaways, there's 2 equal ways to enter, both of them links down in the video description below. Either you can support the channel on Patreon for any amount, it is what allows me to keep these videos coming quite so regularly, and there are a few other bonuses like seeing certain videos early and a few other bits and bobs. Otherwise you can choose to enter by supporting on social media for free if you'd like to, and to do that you need to do all of these 3 actions: subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the Facebook page, and then to actually enter the draw, a post appears on the 1st of May from midnight UK time. Reply to that post with a photo of any 40k mini or imagery, along with your name and date handwritten within the same photo. The last bit is just to ward off Facebook bots and spammers and ensure that the prize goes to a real hobbyist. From there I put in all the entries to a random number generator, the Patreons and the Facebook entries being entered equally. That picks out the 3 winners, and then they'll be announced on the YouTube video on or around the 4th of May, the channel update video that I do regularly each month. The box sets will get posted as soon as I receive them. There's further giveaways each month, and if you have already entered for the Orks and Custodes one, I'll be revealing that on the 4th of April in the similar fashion. In any case, the links are down in the video description if you'd like to check either of those out and support the channel and be in with a chance of winning these. In any case, look forward to hearing your thoughts on all the upcoming stuff down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly be keeping up the regular 40k news and videos. I do tend to post new stuff just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well as entries to the giveaways. There's a few other advantages for people who help me keeping this content coming, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and a few other benefits for some higher backers, things like access to the Discord role over on the server there, and you name in the credits for $5 or more patrons. As always, a massive thank you to you guys who do allow me to keep on doing this as my main thing. It is incredibly nice of you, and if you're interested in checking that out, the link's in the video description. In any case though, an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.